House of Frankenstein was a fitting closure to Universal's monster legacy and brought finality to Dracula, the Wolfman, and the Frankenstein monster. But Universal couldn't leave it alone. The following year, they rushed out House of Dracula, which more or less rehashes the previous films. It's an unnecessary sequel, plain and simple, but for us monster lovers, we'll take it. It stars the three famous monsters again, which makes this the first of the Frankenstein films to not have Frankenstein in the title. And technically Dracula doesn't have a house in it either, but whatever. The film opens with Dracula, again played by John Carradine, entering the home of a doctor. It's a quiet and steady build-up and effectively creepy. Dracula approaches the doctor, Dr. Edelman, and asks for, get this, a cure for his vampirism. Yes, apparently Dracula is bored of blood-sucking and not being able to go out in daylight. He wants a cure. As absurd as that sounds, the doctor agrees because it would be a challenge to medical science. While Edelman's busy talking to Dracula, the friggin' Wolfman shows up too. It's never explained how either of them came back to life. We last saw Dracula turn to bones and the Wolfman shot with a silver bullet, but never, not once, are these incidents ever mentioned. So despite parading itself as a follow-up to the last movie, it's really just another reboot. The only thing that is consistent is that Larry Talbot is tired of being the Wolfman, but this time, rather than trying to die, he's hoping the doctor can cure him. He's in a hurry too, because the full moon is rising. Basically, the secretary has to tell him, sorry Wolfman, the doctor's busy with Dracula at the moment. What is he, the monster doctor? Larry runs out in a panic, goes to the police, and requests to have himself locked in a jail cell. Edelman shows up and, wait a minute, that police officer. Is that Lionel Atwill again? Will that guy ever go away? Anyway, this is a hilarious scene because nobody believes that Larry's a werewolf. They all go through the usual routine of telling him that it's only in his mind, but this is a rare moment when he actually becomes the Wolfman right in front of their faces. That shut them up. Typically, Larry would spend half the movie trying to convince everyone, but here, it's done and over with. The Dracula plotline hits the brakes, and the movie becomes all about the Wolfman for a while. Edelman decides he's going to work on curing Larry and actually explains how his werewolfism works.
Pressure upon certain parts of the brain. When this happens, the glands generate an abnormal supply of certain hormones. In your case, those which bring about the physical transformation which you experience.
That's a serious problem I have with this movie. The werewolf transformation should have been kept supernatural instead of giving it a scientific explanation. Well, it's full moon time, so Larry runs off again. He dives into the ocean and gets washed into a cave. Edelman goes after him and gets attacked by the Wolfman just as the full moon descends. Lucky for him. Then guess what? They find Frankenstein's monster in the mud along with the skeleton of Dr. Niemann. Whoa, hold on here. Up until now, the last movie's been ignored. They don't follow up on what happened to Dracula or the Wolfman, but now they're following up on the monster? So this is like a half reboot, half sequel? Anyway, now Edelman's really got his hands full. He's got Dracula, the Wolfman, and now the Frankenstein monster laying on his table. Like every other scientist, he wants to revive the monster, but for the meantime, he decides against it. One thing I don't understand is why Edelman was familiar with Dracula and the Frankenstein monster, but he didn't believe Larry would turn into a werewolf. Whatever. By the way, Edelman has two female assistants. One of them is a hunchback and has almost nothing to do with the plot. The other is a subtle love interest to Larry, which comes off at pure random. Also, Dracula takes a liking to her, and that's when things take a turning point, because now he wants to remain a vampire. It's my impression that this was Dracula's plan all along, just to get into the doctor's house, since the very first scene shows him staring through a window at the assistant. Edelman is giving Dracula a blood transfusion, which I guess is supposed to make him stop being a vampire, but Dracula reverses the flow of the transfusion and contaminates Edelman. What happens to Edelman isn't exactly clear. At first it's implied that he becomes a vampire, because you can see he has no reflection. But instead, he turns into some kind of Jekyll and Hyde character. He switches between good and evil at random. He becomes the main monster of the movie. In fact, for a while, he's the only monster. He kills Dracula by opening his coffin, exposing him to sunlight. How anticlimactic is that? Dracula doesn't even have a chance to wake up and realize what's happening. At least he lasted a bit longer than he did in House of Frankenstein. As for the Wolfman, Edelman performs a surgical operation on his brain and cures him, and the Frankenstein monster is still lying on the table. So for now, all we have is the mad Edelman running around terrorizing people. The good news is that he's really fun to watch. There's a very creepy moment where he scares a coach driver and you're kept in suspense waiting for him to kill the guy. Had it not been for the overacting of the coach driver, this would be one of the most effective scenes in the whole Universal catalog. It could have been as suspenseful as the scene with the madman's soul in the old dark house. After he kills the driver, he's chased by the villagers through the town. It heavily borrows from the scene in Nosferatu, where Renfield is being chased. The way they both climb on the roofs draws a strong comparison. The shot of Edelman's shadow growing larger is reminiscent of German expressionist photography. In the end, Larry steps out into the light of the full moon and confirms that he is no longer a werewolf. I have to say, I really like the silver bullet better. Having him cured is a disappointing way to end the Wolfman, but on the other hand, it's nice to see a happy ending after all he's suffered through. With only a few minutes left of the film, Edelman finally revives the Frankenstein monster and everything is wrapped up faster than you can say what the shit. Larry shoots Edelman and the monster staggers about destroying the lab. Stuff explodes and catches fire, and next thing you know, you're watching the same ending from Ghost of Frankenstein. Literally, they recycled the same footage, one of Universal's cheapest and shameless moments. So the monster burns to death again, and that's the end. House of Dracula does have its good moments, like all those creepy shots involving shadows, but the plot is uninspired, the ending is a complete letdown, and all three monsters get shortchanged. It is by far, without any doubt, the weakest entry in the series.